Good afternoon, welcome. The Transportation Committee reviews items of interest regarding all modes of transportation in the city of Oshkosh, including motor, transit, bike, and pedestrian. We're an advisory committee, and our favorable recommendations today will go before the Oshkosh Common Council as needed. The council can accept or reject any recommendation from this committee. If you don't agree with our decision, you can discuss the item with any council member. If the committee does not recommend an item, a common council member may sponsor a new ordinance regarding that item. All ordinance items require 2 readings before the common council. The first meeting will take place on December 23rd. I believe that's a Monday, correct? Because
No.
Tuesday is Christmas Eve.
That we canceled our second meeting in December.
You did?
Yeah.
Okay, well then, we'll strike that. So then, the first reading will take place on Tuesday, January 14th at 6 p.m., and you'll be allowed to comment on the item at that time, though the council will take no action. On Tuesday, January 28th at 6 p.m., the item will be on a second reading, at which time council will take action. You will again be allowed to speak. This afternoon's meeting, we'll read each agenda item, at which time, if you'd like to speak, please step to the podium and give your name and address. I do ask you keep your comments pertinent to the agenda item. The item will then come back to the committee for discussion and action as necessary. The committee has 2 alternate members who are allowed to participate in discussion but not make motions to be included in roll call votes or agenda items with the exception of the initial roll call and minutes approval. Public comment. I don't think we have anybody here for a public comment, so I will skip that section. So with that, roll call.
Staple?
Here.
Armstrong?
Here.
Merritt?
Here.
Hartman?
Here.
Essinger?
Here.
Martin? Here.
Do I have a motion to approve the minutes from our November meeting?
So moved.
Second, Jim.
Mr. Axlinger and Mr. Axlinger moved, correct, and Mr. Staple seconded. Call the roll.
Staple?
Aye.
Armstrong?
Aye.
Merritt?
Aye.
Hartman?
Aye.
Essinger?
Aye.
Martin?
Aye.
All right. We have no old business, I believe. New business, request for recommendation on sidewalk installation in newly constructed sections of Bayshore Drive and Bay Street.
Okay, well, this is something new for this committee since we've merged the bike and ped and the with this committee. So in the past, we've taken issues like this to the bike and ped committee, so now they'll be coming here. So the Public Works Department had asked you to take a look at this, and Justin Gierek, our city engineer, is here as well if you got any questions. But this is a request for recommendation on sidewalk installation. We're going to be reconstructing Bayshore Drive and Bay Street this coming year in 2025. And that would be, there is currently, as you can see, no sidewalk on the south side of Bayshore Drive. So this section here from Broad to Mills being reconstructed. So looking for a recommendation on sidewalk here, and as I noted in the staff report, the state statute says that basically that streets can require sidewalk where council requires on either or both sides of the street. And the city had previously, as part of the strategic plan, instructed staff to incorporate complete streets principles when and where feasible when designing and reconstructing streets. So what that means is a street that are designed and operated to enable safe use and support mobility for all users. So with that tenet in mind, construction of sidewalks a core principle to make the street more accessible and support mobility for all users. And so that's why staff is recommending installing sidewalks in support of that strategic plan initiative as well as the statute. So we're looking for your recommendation for installing sidewalk on Bayshore Drive on the south side, which we're looking at here from Broad to Mill, and then on Bay Street, there's a typo here, but that's Bay Street from Bay Shore Drive to the river, which is just up here. That's, I think, a short, like, probably even like a half a block, I want to say. And I believe that would be right here. So in support of this, I believe now this part of Bay Street was reconstructed previously, right?
Yeah, I want to say that was reconstructed in the 2000s-ish. I don't have the exact date.
So you can see on Bay Street it kind of ends here, and this will reconstruct it the rest of the way to the river. And then on Bay Shore Drive, I believe as well, that was reconstructed a few years back from Mill Street to the east. So you can see here that the sidewalk ends here where that last project was. So this would be a recommendation for sidewalk on the south side here.
I've driven that a couple of times to look at it, and those buildings are really close to the street. I assume that we're going to run the sidewalk pretty close to the building itself.
And is there a sidewalk on the other side of the street the whole way?
Yes.
Yes.
So yeah, the intent would be to install the sidewalk on the right-of-way line, which is what municipal code requires. The building faces of some of those are right on that. Not too different than some of our downtown streets.
Sure.
Main Street as an example.
But there is physically room to put a sidewalk without blowing up the building.
The buildings are not within the right-of-way. There may be some instances where encroachments from the buildings overhang in the right-of-way, and we're working with those property owners to get encroachment agreements to have some minor bump outs around those impediments that jut out into the right-of-way. But generally, the building does not encroach into the right-of-way.
So Go ahead.
My question is, if we have a perfectly good sidewalk on one side, why do we need it on the other side? When it's a building there, there's not homes there.
So this area is, if you want to spin around, there's a couple storage units, and I think it's part of kind of the marina district. So there's several areas that get a fair amount of traffic for kind of daily fisherman use. To get them from walking out of the street and onto the public sidewalk as they traverse to get whatever they need to their equipment, their boats, what have you, to be able to walk out of the street and walk on the public sidewalk.
And I see that a lot of them are parking right where I think the sidewalk, or at least somebody was parked right where the sidewalk was going to be. Is that going to cause an issue? Because I'm kind of with you if nobody's using it, but I get if you're doing this now because 30 years from now there may be houses there and this is what you're building.
There.
Yeah, so right now that's parking in the right of way. We've been working with both businesses, both the one to the east of here as well as this, about what it looks like, the parking that's going to be there or not be there. There's not enough right of way room to provide angle parking, but there'll be parking, and I think this side, or this currently has parking on the south side but not the north side. There's no planned parking changes. They're just not going to have the current drive out parking that they have today, because there's really no defined road there. Once the project's done, there'll be curb and gutter, a defined road edge, and they'll have their normal on-street parking they'll be able to use.
Where are they gonna put the snow?
There'll be terraces.
There will?
Yep.
By that building down the street there? Because that's pretty close to a zero, well, it's not a 0-foot setback, but looks
The
pretty
one
tight.
that's got all the bushes along it.
Yeah.
So all those bushes will end up going away. That's
yeah.
growth
Yeah.
in the right of way.
Yeah.
The sidewalk will be installed on the right of way line adjacent to the building. So there is intended to be a terrace
Oh,
outside of kind of the back of curb between
yeah.
the sidewalk and back of curb.
But, so those bushes are there right now, so nobody's parking there to begin, right now, right?
I don't believe that stretch has allowed any parking. I would have to confirm that, but I don't
So
believe
if
there
you
is.
allow parking on both sides, there's not room then for the cars to get through each way.
There would be still no parking. So this project is not planning any parking changes. The north side, I believe, currently has no parking. There's some stretches on the south side that is not allowing parking. I think there is some loading zones. But we're gonna change over back by where those storage buildings are from being a straight up pull up into the front to be on-street parking, no different than what kind of
Yeah.
the north side looks today.
So the cars are parking on the side of the street that has the sidewalk now?
No.
No,
Okay. Where are they parking?
South side,
On the south side.
Where
which is
the
where we
bushes
want,
are.
where we want to install sidewalk.
So we put a sidewalk there, then they can't park there, because the sidewalk's gonna be there.
There'll be curb and gutter there when we're done anyways, so they can't park like they're trying to park right now anyways.
Yeah, they would have to basically parallel park, right? So it'd be like they just have to parallel park on.
But
The
the
curb,
street
like
is
most-
wide enough then for traffic to get by both ways when you have parking like
Yeah,
that?
so it's 32
It's a
feet.
32-foot street, 32-foot road face to face. There's no parking on the north side. So with a 8-foot parking lane and two 11-foot drive lanes, you'll have some extra space yet. 22, you got 30 feet, you got kind of 2 extra feet to play with.
Generally, our rule is for a 32-foot street, then it's local input. We don't generally put on-street parking regulations in place for that unless there's a reason, like if there's heavy traffic, obviously a 32-foot street, you don't want parking on both sides because that'll restrict it to 2 8-foot lanes. But with this, like Justin said, with this already being restricted for most of the north side, they would be able to park on the south side. It would just be parallel parking.
And the people who have those buildings on the south side, they knew about this meeting, know what you're planning, and could have been here if they had objections?
Correct. We sent them all notices. And I think Justin met with a number of
I met with 2 of the owners on the south side of those businesses and are well aware of it. This was several months ago, but then again, I believe Transportation Committee or Transportation had sent notices out to the residents that were going to be affected.
Okay.
what are the financial implications?
So the council enacted the transportation utility fee for replacement or the rehab of existing facilities. So with this being a new installation, the first time they will be charged for the new sidewalk. Any rehab done after that, it would be underneath the transportation utility fee. So the new sidewalk is no different than it was before the transportation fee was enacted. They will get assessed for the new sidewalk as a new installation. It's the first time it's being installed.
And who's gonna maintain the sidewalk? I get rid of the snow on the vacant lots that it looks like there are further up on the south side there.
Per municipal code that is required by the adjoining property owners.
So yeah, this whole area to
I
the
think
left
that the
there.
railroad owns that, right, or they do down here, but
No, that's public right of way.
this is,
So
Yep.
the city would plow that sidewalk every time it snowed?
The south side, so the area I think Jim is talking about is actually Broad Street right of way, so up to kind of that power pole and hydrant. West of that point is public right of way, it's the Broad Street right of way out to the Fox River. Everything east of there is a private property owned parcel that
So this is
property
private.
owner would have to maintain.
so somebody owns this.
Correct.
Who owns that where people are fishing and,
At the end of the right of way?
Yeah.
Basically by the railroad
yeah, when
bridge?
you drive right into the river if you know, where the, what is it?
Oh, or Bay Street?
Yeah, where.
At the end of
or
Bay
the-
would,
Winnebago County has their boat there or whatever.
so that is the public right of way.
Okay. All the way along there?
Along the railroad corridor, yes. Are you talking Bay Street?
We're talking, this is Bay Street here.
Yeah, no, to the,
You're talking.
You're talking
about Broad?
yeah.
Off of Broad.
Right.
So that is the Broad Street right of way. It's public right of way owned by the city of Oshkosh. Is no different than any other public right of way.
Okay.
Specifically, the sheriff, the boathouse that you mentioned, the sheriff, Winnebago County Sheriff has a long-term lease with the city of Oshkosh to have that boathouse in public right of way because it's not private property.
Right.
Okay. Any other questions on this? Can we have a motion on this?
Move to approve.
Mr. Angstrom moves. Do we have a second?
Second.
Mr. Armstrong seconds. All right, ready to vote?
Johnson,
Yeah, call the roll.
Staple,
Aye.
Armstrong,
Aye.
Merritt,
Aye.
Hartman,
Aye.
Esslinger,
All right.
All right. Second agenda item, request for recommendation on city street parking regulations. With that, I think we have someone who wants to speak
Yeah,
to that.
let me just give you the background quick, and then we can do the public
Yep.
comment and then go from there. So as you may recall, we presented a study on city parking policies. That was back in August. So you got another copy of that. And that was a result of a request by the city council to explore the possibility of free overnight parking. And as you remember, we separated it in on-street and off-street. So this is dealing with the on-street part. Currently, the city ordinance is no overnight parking from 2 a.m. to 5 a.m., and that's citywide, unless you have a permit or get special temporary permission. At that time, the committee recommended that staff get public input via Polco, which is the city's surveying mechanism on this issue. So we did conduct a survey through Polco, and you got the results. You got two documents. One was kind of a summary of the data, and then one was the whole report with all the comments, which was 76 pages long. So kudos if you got through that, but there was a lot there. So you got those two. Survey results were interesting. As expected, they reflect a wide array and diversity of opinions regarding on-street parking. Some things I just thought were interesting that I noted was 94% of the respondents are aware of the overnight parking regulations. 88% of the respondents are aware of the ability to get temporary permission to park overnight from the police department, and 70% are aware that permits can be purchased for overnight parking. So about half of and then also about half the respondents had received a ticket for overnight parking, and most only received one. So that tells me that people that were responding are ones that obviously had received a ticket, and then if they did, they must have learned from that experience. 65% of respondents have experienced no or minor inconvenience based on the restriction. And I just highlighted some comments there. By no means I just picked out a couple that seemed relevant to each of these arguments. There were a ton of them in any of these options. But some of the things I think that as you consider this issue that are important, considering the ease of regulation understanding for citizens and then obviously for enforcement as well. I think we need to be consistent throughout the city. There are potential unintended consequences, and some of those were referenced in some of the comments, like junk vehicles, camping, etc. Revenue, there's revenue impact. I think no matter what is recommended and council ultimately decides, there needs to be some type of time limit, whether that be 24 or 48 hour. So if we did do something different, there are stormwater regulations. If you have questions about this, Justin can help me answer those as well. But basically, the gist of that is that we have regulations for stormwater quality, and part of that is doing regular street sweeping. And the current regulations allow us to do that more frequently without as many obstacles or restrictions. And then the need for snow emergencies. There's obviously many narrow streets due to the age of the city. So there's a number of policy options. Option one, status quo, no overnight parking from 2 a.m. to 5 a.m. unless a parking permit or permission is obtained. We did receive some comments that I thought were interesting. Some of the arguments against that are there's aesthetic quality people felt with parked cars overhead to utilities, and lack of trees being negative impacts on property values and aesthetics. Some people didn't like the idea of possibly having vehicles parked 24/7, and that being, like I said, an eyesore, especially in older neighborhoods, and then concerns for children crime and the general surroundings. And they didn't think that getting permission was a big inconvenience. Someone else mentioned they moved from a city that didn't have restrictions. Sleeping in vehicles and trash in the streets was a constant problem. They support not changing it. Someone else said they'd been to towns with junk cars on the streets and would like us to regulate how long it could be parked. Likes what we've been doing. Someone else said don't change what you've been doing. Someone else mentioned that parked cars impact their garbage pickup, as well as some other things like mail delivery. So that's one option. Another option is no overnight parking unless a snow emergency is declared with a maximum of 24 or 48 hours. Some comments were allow overnight parking at all times unless necessary for snow removal, or restriction extreme examples like snow emergencies. Another option would be on-street parking allowed and alternate side parking required year-round for the 2 a.m. to 5 a.m. hours, again with the maximum time limits. Some people mentioned alternate side parking like Milwaukee, or enforce alternate side parking. Another option is on-street parking allowed, alternate side parking required from November 1st to March 31st from 2 a.m. to 5 a.m. Some comments on that were allow street parking with exceptions, alternate side parking seasonally. Another option is no on-street parking from November to May 31st, alternate side parking from April to October. Some comments supporting that were seasonal or winter parking restrictions, otherwise odd even alternating sides. So anyway, there's a number of different opinions, and you can read through all those. But from staff's perspective, I recommend that they stay status quo. As to me, it seems like most citizens understand the regulations and options for permitting, and the benefits seem to outweigh the consequences. I haven't seen a compelling reason to change. A couple other things to note is the city is investing in a new parking software program. It's in the process of being implemented. I believe it'll be live beginning in January, which will allow online purchasing of permits, and then it will also make enforcement more efficient as well. So that's kind of the gist of the issue.
Okay, thank you. Any comments from?
I noticed, I saw comments that the 3-day-a-month limit of calling in, how long, has that been consistent for a long time?
Do you want to, we can answer that, but do you want to allow public comments
Yes,
first?
yeah,
Oh, I'm
public
sorry.
comment now.
I'm sorry.
Do you want to comment, or you just here? You want to
Go
step
to
over
the
there
podium.
and just give us your name and address?
Hello, my name is John Lenz. I live on Bavarian Court in Oshkosh. And I just wanted to make a couple, first of all, I did fill out the survey. So I thought one of the reason I'm here is to make a point that I thought was a little difficult to get across in just a survey answer. So first I want to say that anyone that wants to park a car overnight in Oshkosh certainly can. The current rules facilitate that. So it's not like we're taking anything away. And I think the rules accommodate for probably 90% of the situations that people have for reasons to park overnight. Maybe this is coming about for maybe 10% of the situations that it doesn't work appropriately for. So that's what I'm interested to talk about. So I'd say what my comment is about is I think an economist would refer to it as a leading indicator. A miner would think about its analogy as a canary in the mine shaft, but I think overnight parking is an indication of abnormal operation in a certain area of the city. And by having a record of overnight parking is an opportunity to look as something that's happening in that area of the city that can lead to other situations that are maybe not desirable outcomes. So I know in our neighborhood we have something similar going on, and I think it's easy to see that the parking is what becomes the barrier, the obvious constraint for too many people living in a house, too many people coming into a neighborhood, staying without a residency. So I think the parking permit provides an opportunity to see something that's maybe will develop in the future as a leading indicator. So that's my comment for this.
Thank you. All right, back to the committee.
All right. So Lieutenant Kramer can help me answer that question, I hope. So you want to grab a seat?
Good afternoon. So the 3 nights a month has been that way for ever since I've started here, so at least 15 years. So that hasn't changed, and it allows the out-of-town guest or whatever. Usually it's someone that isn't aware of it, and we allow them the night to call their night in a night or two, and then they can get in and get their permit, in the following day. So.
Okay. I was just thinking, if somebody, say, had a visitor for the week between Christmas and New Year, and they had to be on the street 5 days.
Typically during our holiday seasons, there is a relaxed parking that the captain would probably send out some sort of memo or notification, and that would be that Christmas to New Year timeframe or Thanksgiving.
Okay.
Is that true during EAA too?
Probably. I don't have the exact dates of when he does that, or she, whoever's in the patrol captain position, but typically those high influx timeframes of out-of-town guests.
Thank you.
And Justin, can you just explain? I don't think I did it justice, but the stormwater requirement.
Yeah, so biggest picture, or trying to make this as layman as possible. So the city has street sweeping policies where we sweep at night when there's no parking on the streets. Because of that, in the citywide implementation of the citywide stormwater management plan, the model that we use gives so many credits for poundage reduction of suspended solids, dirt, debris, salts, and things like that in the road, as well as total phosphorus from leaves and things like that get into the waterways. As a part of our annual permit, we're required to reduce those efforts, or reduce the amount that's being put into the waterways. And there's something called a no backslide clause put out by DNR that says once you're meeting a certain level, you can't go backwards in that. So changing the parking regulations, depending on what it would look like, would mean we're actually collecting less pollutants, whether it be total suspended solids or total phosphorus, that would get into the waterways. So the city would have to do something else to be able to make up that difference. Some of the study that we did is to kind of prepare for this. Some of the ponds we've done throughout the city, size-wise or volume-wise being captured, is similar to what we would actually be losing in the credit we've got. To construct those ponds can cost anywhere from $2.5 to almost $4 million. To again make up that difference we'd be losing in the offset of what we'd be taking up with the street sweeping.
And wouldn't be getting the benefit of nice clean streets.
Absolutely.
Other committee comments, questions?
So the position of your position is that having different rules for different parts of the city really isn't good because difficult to enforce. No, and the only reason I ask is I live in a really quiet neighborhood. I got a ticket, my fault, kept my car overnight, didn't bring it in the driveway. But literally there's no traffic on that street during the day at all, or at night, probably after 8 o'clock, because it's virtually a dead-end street. So ticketing people like that to me seems a little not proper to me for some reason. But so I kind of came to this thing, what's the big deal? But now that I understand the bigger position, I get it. But I just it doesn't make sense to me to get people tickets in the middle of the night. I think mine was at 4:48 a.m.
Yeah, I think from staff's position, it's all those things we talked about. But as far as different areas, I think it's for consistency and enforcement. So I know that for the officers already, there's a lot of different policies, say for our downtown parking lots, which those are a little bit easier, but the more variance that we have in the policies in the areas, it makes it more complicated, for the residents and for enforcement, in my opinion.
I would just add that oftentimes you would end up just moving an issue into your neighborhood. So say you come up with the rule of if it's a dead-end street, you don't have overnight parking regulations. Well, then the people that are on your thoroughfare just around the corner are always going to be parking in front of your house. Or if you buffer it to the university area, the university students will eventually figure out and they're going to park their cars in front of a resident's house. And then that resident is going to be calling us saying, I have 10 cars that never move except when they go home for Thanksgiving or Christmas. So having it, there's always going to be some sort of jurisdictional line or boundary for when you have that. And those that live on that boundary line are going to see the impact because people eventually just figure it out and park in front of their house.
So what are the rules now for Joe citizen that just wants to keep his car out in front of his house tonight? So how, I can do that 3 times a month or any time, or I can get a pass or permit, or how does that work again?
Yeah, so if you get a permit, then you just rotate odd and even based off the day of the week, starting on.
And what's the cost for the permit?
It's like $10 a month.
Is it? Okay. Yeah, I don't have the dollar. I'd have to get back to you on the cost.
Now, okay, so if I have guests that come over, I'm just coming up with scenarios because this is what happens, and I have relatives that come over several times a month. Do I get a permit for me or for them? Do I have to give their license number?
So they would call into the police department's non-emergency number. They would get added to the roll of vehicles that are allowed or authorized to be parked overnight on city streets. They would give the license plate number and the address that it's going to be in front of, or at least the 100 block. That is authorized per vehicle 3 times within a 1 month period. So if they're going to be there for a longer period of time, then they would have to get the permit for that vehicle in that 100 block of where you live.
Or couldn't Mr. Esslinger park his car there for the 3 days and use his license number?
Right.
And then the guest
Right.
uses it the other 3 days.
That's true too.
I was under the understanding that you, the owner of the residence, could not park on the street in front of that overnight, like we're talking. Am I misunderstanding that? I thought it was only home, vehicles that were not registered to a residence right there that could get the overnight parking permission for the 3-day thing, the visitor thing.
Yeah, I've never heard that. I think it's, so like Lieutenant Kramer said, there's 2 options, right? So there's temporary, so I got a guest staying for 2 nights, so you call into the police department, hey, my cousin from out of town's gonna be here for a couple nights, need to park the car on the street for 2 nights. You give them the information, they take that down, you're good to go. There's not a cost associated with that. And then there's the other alternative is that you can buy a permit for parking on street if there is parking allowed on both sides of the street.
Oh,
So,
sure.
because obviously it gets difficult with the odd and even when there's only parking on one side of the street, or if there's no parking because it's too narrow, then obviously you can't park there at all. But you get that permit, and then you're good. You can get an annual permit, a monthly permit, or in the university area, you can get a 9-month permit. And then you can park, you just hang the permit in the windshield and you can park overnight. So there are options for people that need to park overnight.
Are all these options that you're talking about, are they all going to be available on that online system?
Yes, that's the intent. Yeah, and that's Passport Parking is the product. I think you've been involved with that, right?
Any other questions for staff? Can we have a motion to retain, well,
I'd move that we
Yeah,
retain
we-
the status quo.
all right,
I'll second.
all right. Mr. Staple?
Evelyn.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Can call the roll.
Staple,
Aye.
Armstrong,
Aye.
Merritt,
Aye.
Hartman,
Aye.
Esslinger.
Present.
Okay,
So the intent is, we don't have it from a public hearing, but anyway, if anybody that's interested, the intent is to take these 2 things then to the council, is the sidewalk gonna go to council as well in January? Okay. All right. The parking, I'd like to get to, on the council agenda in January so they can put this issue, make a decision one way or another, what we're gonna do. Since we put a lot of time and effort into it so far, so we'll get a decision in January.
Jim, is it on your website, is it the police website? I think there's a lot of confusion with it. Council member, I know some of the stuff you're talking about. So I think there's a lot of confusion in the public of what you can do. Is this posted on any of our websites, or is it fairly easy?
The police department it is, and the police department currently is the one that manages that permit process.
Yep.
So I was gonna try to pull it up here.
And I believe there's a reference to it on the city website. When you click there, then it goes to the police's, if I remember correctly. But yeah, I know that all that information is definitely on the Flick that looked there, right through it on there.
Okay. Are we through with this item? Okay. Staff statements, we got the ridership update.
Yep, so nothing real major to report there. Ridership's about, it's up a little bit year to date. Month to month, it's about the status quo. We're still in the implementation phase of our electronic fare collection system. So the way that works, the revenue is going to be down a little bit, but then it's going to go back up as people start using those passes. But overall, it's year to date, it's been pretty good. So yeah, that's about all I got for ridership. The only other thing I got to report is that as you remember, the paratransit, we had that on the agenda last meeting, so we presented at the County Aging Disability Resource Committee meeting last night, so we got some input from them. There seems to be some general consensus of not offering 24/7, however, some type of compromise is probably where we'll end up landing. The goal now is to get a group, a focus group together, some of the people from the last meeting, and then we'll go over some options with them and then bring that back, like I said, to the committee in probably February or March to potentially do some type of change, say April-ish. And we're currently working with the current vendor to try to improve service as well. So that's what's going on with that. And then just a preview for January. The main topic there currently is we're going to talk about the Sawyer Oshkosh Ave intersection. So stay tuned for that.
Oh, okay. Well, that should be interesting.
Yeah, we have actually a engineering firm that was hired to present some design options, so we'll have those for the January meeting.
Okay. Future agenda items. I have one. Mr. Collins, you and I had a conversation after the last meeting, and you had indicated that the paratransit 24/7 has been a concern for some time, and I didn't know that. I mean, it wasn't anywhere on my radar as something that there was concern about. I'm wondering, in next April when the committee gets reconstituted, if there ought to be a workshop that kind of goes over first the items that are under our purview, and then are there other items that staff's had in terms of here are some items that we're thinking are going to be issues in the next year, 2 years. Partly so I start thinking about it, and so the committee members start thinking about it. So that just a thought for me. I don't know how other people feel about that, but
Yeah, I mean, that's a possibility with a larger issue like that, which it depends. So sometimes in the past, for instance, when we had the Transit Advisory Board, during one meeting when we had new members, we would just present, all right, well, here's what transit is, here's what we do, and then we had a meeting about paratransit, here's what it is, here's how it works. So if we have time in a normal meeting, we would do that, say there's a light agenda and we have time to do that. However, yeah, in this case, something like that where we know that it's gonna be a larger issue, then yeah, we definitely could do something like that, whether it's during a regular meeting or a special meeting. we did learn through that process, because it's interesting that you mentioned that, because like last night we presented at the Aging and Disability Resource Center, and we learned that, I think we were presenting at to use a college analogy, like a 300 level class, and we needed like a 0-100 or prior class, because they didn't even understand what we currently are doing or why we're currently doing it. So yeah, I think that makes sense for some of those issues like that. And we've learned through that issue that, you know, we assume, I guess, probably that people understood more than they did. So yeah, that would be a good suggestion.
Okay, thank you, because I hope I wasn't the only one that didn't see the full picture of this thing before it got started.
Yeah, I think, like, for example, like Evelyn and Jeff were on the Transit Advisory Board, so they probably had a little more background than people that weren't, you know, that came from, you know, like Jim's been on parking from, so he has the background on parking, but not on transit. Or, you know, Sean came from bike and ped, so he obviously has that history. So now that we have one committee, I think that's probably a valid point, that some of these things we're gonna have to start with background, which might require a workshop.
I think that would be fine.
Right.
I mean, I think spending an hour just talking about the purview of what you're dealing with and any potential problems that you think may be coming down the road, I think would be helpful for us.
Yeah, definitely. And that obviously was a bigger issue that,
Sure.
those are, we don't have a lot of those, but yes, when we have those, that would make sense.
Okay. Any other future agenda items?
So I don't know if this is a future agenda request, but after last month's meeting, it seemed like one of the big rubs of that whole situation is getting to church on Sunday. And I just wanted to throw out that one of the congregations that I formerly attended, they had their own transportation fund that they helped with that. So is this an opportunity to maybe go to the congregations and seek help from them as well?
That's a possibility. However, so we did do a study on rides on Sunday, and it looks like the majority of them, as we expected, are between 7 and 1:32 at the latest. However, we did look at where they were coming and going from, and it was like, there wasn't like one specific church, there was like 10 of them.
Yeah.
So that might be a little difficult, because there was just so many different ones. It wasn't like, but if we find that there's a couple that the majority of people are coming and going from, then yes, we could obviously talk to them about that and see if there's other options.
And I'm not necessarily suggesting a city-funded program.
Right. Yeah.
They take that in-house to their congregations and help each other.
Yep, that's a possibility.
We have several that are right next to each other here downtown that can certainly.
Yeah. And I know some churches do that. I don't know to what extent. I know in the past that used to be a pretty popular thing, where whatever congregation would, either they would have a van that pick people up and drop them off, or they would have volunteers that do that. I don't know to what extent that happens anymore. But yeah, that's available.
Okay. Any other future agenda items? If not, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right, Mr. Eslinger. Mr. Staple, seconded. Call the roll.
Staple.
Aye.
Armstrong.
Aye.
Merritt. Hartman.
Aye.
Esslinger. Martin.
Thank you all. Hope you have a great holiday.